Hello, welcome to another Azure Centric Podcast on our weekly update show. My name is Marcos Nogueira, and with me I have my partner in crime, Andrew Lowes. How are you, Andrew?
I'm very good. Thank you so much for having me again this week, Marcos.
Yes,
So it's been a little bit quieter in the Azure world
it
this
is.
week,
It is.
certainly than the last few weeks. But there's some really good things coming up, I think, right? So what were some of the things that you were really kind of looking forward to as we were chatting?
There is a few updates regarding Azure VMs on different ways. There is one very cool update regarding Azure, not Azure, but ExpressRoute in this case that is in preview. We don't have a very, I have to say, and probably is good news for you that you are listening. That we don't have a very long list of updates, so which is good because we can dive more into those each updates, allow us to do it to be conservative of your time, and that is basically what we have for this week, right? We don't have much more. We are relying on the Azure team to just be able to give us something to talk about it this week, right?
I think you might have to pay a royalty on that song, but yep.
Yes, but I want to start with before we starting with the updates. I want to touch two topics. One of them is we introduced this new format that we kind of create, kind of resume what we're going to talk about it, and that was one of our listeners, and thank you in this case, to just give it that feedback so we can improve it. And we saw this week a lot of response from you guys. So
It was amazing.
it was
Amazing.
amazing.
So much feedback. It was really
So
cool.
much feedback, so much everything. So first of all, I think I speak with both of us. Thank you. If you are new to the channel, or to the podcast, to the show, don't forget to subscribe, and don't forget to just supporting us. Please continuing sharing our love. It's been amazing. I've been blow my mind with all the support that you guys having with us, and that is really cool. I have to say, and that is the first part. The second part is, as you probably know, I am an MVP, right? A Microsoft MVP. And last week, we didn't mention on our podcast, but it was a tremendous outage in Azure. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Especially
There was a little bit of what we call a hiccup
a hiccup.
in services.
It
Yeah.
was a little bit more than a hiccup. But what I have to say about this is everything is public. We are not here condemning anyone. What I'm
Oh,
here
no, not at all.
what I'm here to do, and Andrew doesn't know this, it's going to be a surprise for him, is I'm here to pledge a kind of thank you, and to see that the evolution of Microsoft regarding this. They have this a huge outage that starts on Azure AD and affects basically a lot of services, Teams,
Hmm.
and a lot of other services, the Azure portal, a lot of other services that were affected by this outage.
Anything that relies on Azure AD authentication, and as soon as those tokens were expiring, whatever service was needed to be accessed
Yeah.
was not available because you couldn't re-authenticate that token.
Yes. But the good thing that I like about this that I want to say is this week, after everything was settled, and back to normal, and Microsoft knows what it is and was already working on some real ability of the service for the future, they had a very open Microsoft or MVP conversation when they expose with way more detail that I cannot disclose over here. but they explore with way more detail and asking us MVPs. And because we are MVPs, we are also customers, and we have our customers as well to just apologize. They starting the call with apologizing, which is good because they acknowledge that fact, and they kind of use that as a learning curve for them to making even better the service. So there is going to be in the next, I don't know what is the time frame, or I know what's the time frame, but I cannot disclose that. But let me say that in the very near future, there will be a massive Azure Azure AD updates because of this outage. And then I just want to pledge the publicly the huge thank you for Microsoft, because it's not very common for even other players or other organizations to just say to just assume the mea culpa, right? And to just be so open about those facts and saying, yes, we made a mistake. There was a bug on the system that we thought that was good, and we already address it. And I think it shows maturity and shows the new mindset that Microsoft have it regarding all of those things, and makes me even work with there anymore. I just want to disclosure that before we starting our podcast with updates, because it's Azure related, and it just shows the greatness of one of the biggest companies in the world, and that everyone is using, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So it's interesting, and I didn't know you were going to talk about that, but I actually have a client story about this, because everybody was impacted. If you use Microsoft, pretty much anything Microsoft Cloud, you're impacted by that outage, or were impacted, I should say. So we had a client meeting, me and one of my teams, and they were not a large client, but it's a very critical infrastructure that they run here in Alberta. And they were very deeply concerned about that outage, and they'd done their research. So they knew the number of outages for the last 3 years with Azure AD. They knew it was a single point of failure. And I loved what you were saying, Marcos, because I was able to go to the Azure service page. And as you know, I live and breathe on these status service pages a lot of times when it comes to those tough client questions.
Yes.
And I'm going to say why. Because many years ago, a smart fella showed me those service pages and said, you know what? Microsoft is going to tell you everything that they possibly can publicly released right here. So for me, just a regular Microsoft guy, I'm just a guy that consumes Microsoft services. I love them and I love sharing about them. So I just hang out here and, talk about some stuff, right? But what I was able to relay directly from Microsoft to our client was that, hey, Microsoft acknowledges that it's a single point of failure. They've been working on it, and clearly what they did didn't work. So they had made in that service page a commitment that they will do better. And I love that they're utilizing the MVP force of experts across the world to really help bridge the gap and mend those fences, because that's important. And you talked about the new Microsoft, and that's the Microsoft that I've really kind of come to know in the last 5 years or so, right, under Satya. And I think it's been absolutely amazing, the difference in the response on the ground. Like when we think about executives, we think of them as somewhat detached from how things are really hands-on with customers.
Absolutely.
And very often that is the case in a large corporation. But I have to admit, as a regular person with hands-on Microsoft products, I feel well supported by Microsoft. And we have lots of different ways to get that support and get those right answers. And the fact that they're open and honest about things is just what a huge difference that makes for all of us in the community, because we're able to talk openly about outages. And like you said, many customers remember, 20 years ago, or even with other companies today, that an outage is just accepted as what it is. It's an outage. What happened behind the scenes is confidential for whatever reason, and you don't get a whole lot of information about it. But Microsoft really does talk about why an outage happened. They give you the breakdown of it, and they tell you what they're working towards to prevent it from happening again. So we know that we need some redundancy with Azure Active Directory. And I think that it's absolutely amazing that that redundancy is on the way. We've hoped and prayed for it for a long time, so it's really good that it's coming.
Yes, absolutely. And that's the part that I want to start this podcast or this episode for today's show about talking about that, because I think it's important to show the evolution. And I reinforce, even this case, I reinforce that. And the good thing, and one of the questions that I did to the team, and they bring the big guns, I have to say, to speak with us. It's not very usual that we have VPs talking to us and apologizing to us, I have to say. But one of the questions is, okay, because last time they had one of those, and they are addressing all of those single point of failures. It was regarding MFA. And one of the things that they did that I did asking is, yes, with all of those outages, we learned as an architect and as a professionals and the SMEs how to build our solutions regarding that. And right now, it's one of my recommendations, and I highly recommend for everyone to do it regarding building the Azure governance and all of that, to create what's called a breaking glass account, global admin account, without MFA, because
correct.
They since then they've never been any issues with MFA, but you never know, and you can and opens different types that we were not thinking about it, right? And that's the part that I like about having these outages or having these failures, is to bring the best, okay, that you can have it, instead of going there and criticize and all of that. I don't see that as a add value as a professionals, right?
Well, no, see, because I think we should always encourage an environment, and really interesting. I was actually talking to a client about this yesterday, that I'm really grateful that we can work in an environment with Microsoft and a lot of our clients and partners that give us the freedom to make mistakes. Yes. Because that's how we grow, it's how we learn. Yeah. And you know what? Microsoft, it's full of regular people too. We do hold them to a very high standard, of course. And so I agree. We have to be careful in how not only we think about it, but how we talk about things, right? Absolutely. Because we want the people working on this kind of thing with Azure Active Directory to feel like they can learn.
Absolutely.
Because that's just critical. It's just critical to do that. So yeah, we don't have to be negative about it. Yep, an outage happened. It totally is a problem. Absolutely it is. And Microsoft really does acknowledge that. And it's fantastic, because now we can work to make it better. Right?
Absolutely. So this was one of the biggest introductions. We promise, and we already starting not doing that. We promise to be shorter in this case, but in this case, what we're having is a big introduction. So thank you once again for being here. Let's roll the intro video, and let's jump into our show in this case. So welcome back. Now let's jump into the first update. General availability of enhanced Azure dashboards experience for Pine Log Analytics part. Oh my God, what a team, or in this case, what an introduction, right? Starting with all of this mouthful update. So, but what are we talking about over here, Andrew?
So the dashboards are really cool. So I've been doing a lot of work with some different automations in Azure the last couple of weeks, and been utilizing custom dashboards in Azure. So it's really nice that we can now pin the dashboard pieces for the log analytics parts.
Yes.
It's going to be really nice. So I actually did not realize that was GA until we were doing the updates here today. So I'm going to test that out next week. And we have a development subscription I'm working on, and it's going to be really cool. So some of the things from log analytics, it's one of those, it's an aggregation kind of a thing, right? So it's really nice when we can pin different pieces, like maybe a stored query result, or we need to monitor the number of entries per minute or entries per hour or something like that coming in. So there's going to be different things that we can pin coming out of that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. The part that I like about this, it's like you mentioned, you can create your dashboard on Azure. So if you're going to Azure portal, you beside, or this is below home, you have dashboard. This is the second item, if I'm not mistaken, from the portal.
It is, yeah.
And
I'm always surprised how many people don't know that it's there.
Exactly.
That they didn't know Azure Dashboards was a thing.
And usually, so this is another thing is, you can create an entry point instead of the normal one to go directly to the dashboard for you when you log into Azure, okay? Or in this case, log into Azure portal, I have to say. But this one, what I'm fan of this is, you can create now, you can pin it, in this case, all of those log analytic parts, okay, into the dashboard, and create your own dashboard just to see it, whatever you want to see it regarding your log analytics. Okay, so as far as I was able to read, you can customize it, you can do it, everything that you want to do it regarding your log analytics part. I have to say that I didn't find, or I didn't test it as well. I didn't have time this week to test this, but it's good to know. And what I'm going to do is try to, if you can, the good thing part of this, if you can have multiple log analytics and be feeding into the same dashboard. But
so yes, you can, because you use Kusto query language.
I was thinking on that
to create your widget. And now you can use that. Again, I always feel like I have to explain Kusto. So it's like, it's a different type of SQL. So if you are familiar with SQL or MySQL, then Kusto is going to feel very much at home, right? So I don't profess to be a Kusto expert by any stretch. But I'm definitely familiar with SQL and MySQL from years gone by, and I think that it's really important that we keep that kind of thing moving forward. So Kusto is kind of the next iteration, allows us to quickly write queries, and it's very, very efficient, right? So it also allows to bring back large summaries and create visualizations. So you can write a query. And I think one of the common ones is like RAM utilization, CPU utilization, things like that. So you can bring that back and understand different metrics like that. Really cool that we can pin things and then use queries in the background to aggregate our data, for example, right?
But the best part that I like about this is the possibility of sharing the same dashboard, because even
That's
if
right.
you don't have those knowledge on Kusto queries, right, you can build it and you can share among other ones, so you can have that. And that's pretty cool just to have an idea how is your environment going, right? And I think that is one of the things that we like about this update.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. Yeah. Sharing the dashboard is really cool because then if I spend half an hour creating a dashboard on metrics that we need to know, I can share it with you in the same company so that you can see those metrics, for example, and not have to spend time creating your own.
Absolutely. The next update that we want to talk about is the general availability of publishing VMs image from shared image gallery to Azure Marketplace. We talked about this a few months ago. That was in preview. And now here it is. So the possibility...
Yeah. And this is actually super timely because I actually have a client that is wanting to do some automation around sharing custom images within the company. So this is actually kind of a magical one. I'm really, really happy to see this one this week.
So everyone that listened that episode of the show now is in GA, so now you can use in production. Not that time. Okay. I just want to reiterate that. But yeah, so with this, going back to this, is now we have this shared image gallery that it's within, and I think it's valuable to just going and explain that to everyone that is listening, especially if you are new at the show, that this image is within your Azure tenant. Okay, so you can have multiple, in this case, Azure subscriptions, but is within your tenant. So what is that?
So if you share this in your portal then at Marcos Incorporated, if I log in to Andrew Incorporated and I want to deploy, say, a Windows 2019 server to do some testing on, can I use your image being at a different company?
Different company means different...
Well, let's say different Azure Active Directory tenant.
No, you can't. This is the way that it's only within your company. Okay? So you don't need to be afraid of having shared image galleries into the marketplace. So this marketplace, it's only for you in this case. Okay?
So we would be able to make custom changes, for example, putting agents in that call back, like SCOM agents that call back to operations manager inside our own tenant. So we could deploy images with that type of a customization.
You can deploy. You can do it. It's the Azure way to have what you call the golden image that you want to deploy.
So I'm a fair disclosure. I've been creating images for like 3 weeks straight in there under the preview. So I'm asking questions for the benefit of our audience, because I know sometimes I actually ask questions because I don't know the answers. And I mean, let's be honest. There's lots that we don't know. So how we learn is by asking.
Absolutely. And that's the reason of this show, is to talk about this, because between us, I think we can cover pretty well. But there are topics that it's not my wheelhouse, let's call it this way. And it could be more to you in this case, and vice versa. But in this is the way that you can have your gold image, to resume this, to have your gold image on Azure and is within your tenant. I think that's the most important part of it. We did cover really well on the last show. I don't remember what was the episode, to be very honest, but we covered this.
Oh, I think it was a few ago.
Yeah, it was a few months ago. Yeah.
The one thing I do want to point out about image, like shared image gallery, image builder, is it's different from Bicep. There's been lots of press about Bicep, so this is a little different, right?
Yeah.
There's lots of crossover. Let's be honest, there's lots of crossover, but we're talking about image builder and shared image gallery here. And this, your image, when you publish it to your own tenant's marketplace, is controlled through RBAC.
Yeah.
So you can assign who or what roles and so forth groups have access to that image that you're publishing, which is really great because you can also make it a service principal, which I was doing last week, actually doing some testing. So you can make service principal is the only RBAC permission applied to that image. Yeah. And then your automation tools utilize that service principal to then access and deploy that image out in your tenant. Absolutely. So it's pretty cool, to be honest. Like, it sounds so easy, but it's really cool.
And it's not difficult, although there are some limitations on this, okay? You can only do with Windows Server in this case, and SQL, for example, as well, 2019, 2014, and 2012, the version. On Windows Server, it's all the supported, and Linux as well, you can create those. And this is huge, especially for Linux, because you have so much customization inside of the Linux that can be tremendously to doing that and going there and starting to apply all of those packages, installing all of those packages, configurations, and all of that. So this is tremendous for those organizations that they have Linux in this case as well, right? So it's exactly. Pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
And it is important to, I want to call out the big Linux ones that are supported just real quick. I won't hijack, I promise.
That's okay.
Red Hat Enterprise Linux, SUSE Linux Enterprise, and Oracle Linux. Those ones are the ones that I see most commonly deployed. Certainly, there's lots of other supported Linux builds within Azure. And anything Linux that Azure supports is supported by Image Builder as well. So it's a really versatile tool, and it's actually super duper fun to use. And I would encourage everybody to get out and play with it.
Absolutely.
I mean, if I can figure it out, certainly I think everybody else can too.
Absolutely. The next one is Azure Container Registry, now available in Norway East region. So this is a pretty cool update, especially for, I think it's kind of recent that Norway region has been updated with a lot of those services, right?
We've seen the Scandinavian nations in here quite a bit with different features being added to them. I think there's a lot of growth throughout Europe. Especially as I don't want to focus on this, but it is a driving factor for our industry in IT, and especially with cloud in Azure, that as the pandemic kind of ebbs and flows and we have these different waves kind of come and go over time, there's a lot of demand that builds during those waves. Absolutely. As it gets bad, right?
Absolutely.
So I think that's been driving a lot of innovation and a lot of cloud growth throughout Europe that we've seen, right? And it's actually kind of, I don't know, I have mixed feelings about it at a personal level, but at a professional level, let's say that it's actually really cool. And I think that the cloud innovation is really driving, for example, like a lot of vertical markets like Azure Healthcare, right? And the secure computing and all those really good things, right?
And in this case, allow them to just use more containers in this case and to use all of the part of containers registry to allow them to build, in this case, to store and manage all of those images and artifacts that they need to do it for all of those different deployments or container deployments that they have on that one. It's pretty cool to see it every single week that we are adding more and more to the regions and more service going to be available. Again, not all of those services are available on all of those regions, and that is a reason why. And that's the best segue for the next update. That is our good friend that we are missing for a couple of episodes, Azure Automation, It's now available on our good friends, the UK, in the West region in this case. So UK West, it's now having Azure Automation available. Pretty cool, right?
Absolutely. Yep. As you know, I'm a big fan of process and configuration automation. So having Azure Automation in is going to allow a lot of growth at that orchestration level. And we're really going to be able to take advantage of that now in UK West. We've been seeing this roll out pretty rapidly worldwide. And it's interesting. I'm spoiler alert. This is the only Azure Automation region announced this week.
Yeah.
So I would expect that in the coming weeks we'll probably see kind of another little like a burst, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Like and having more and probably I don't want to be kind of destroyer of this, but probably is more like the reason that we don't see it for a couple of weeks. It could be related that we add Ignite in between, right? And those automation and all of those were more like related to the new features than rolling out all of those that is been existing. But it shows that they don't stop. Azure doesn't stop and is moving forward, right? And it's pretty cool.
Absolutely, it does. Yeah.
Moving to one of the principal updates that we see and one of the more exciting ones. In public preview, we have IPv6 support for ExpressRoute on the private peering. So, and then you ask, but we didn't have IPv6 on ExpressRoute? No, we only had IPv4.
IPv4, absolutely. Yeah, so this is a big jump forward, right?
Yes.
So for a lot of years, everybody's been sort of edging towards IPv6 for a lot of the, let's say, worldwide networks, large enterprise networks especially. And it is a real thing that we are running out of IP allocations in IPv4. Yeah. It's been maxed out for a really long time. And let's be honest, without natting, we'd be in big, big trouble already.
Yes.
So IPv6, it's really important that continues to evolve, right?
Yes.
And that support is gained for that on all these different technologies. And ExpressRoute, I see that as a foundational layer for Azure, like heavy Azure utilization. There's a lot of appropriate circumstances where ExpressRoute should be used. And I think it's fantastic that the support continues to grow.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I kind of see this happening in line with a lot of the route management features that have been getting announced with BGP
yes.
In Azure.
Right? And the good thing about this is it can work with all of with both IPv4 and IPv6, and it's basically target or not target. It's basically to expand the mobile and the IoT markets. Okay, although in preview, so it's not to use in production, although to just use ExpressRoute on the private peering, you can still using that on the production environment because it's ExpressRoute. But it's
so
only.
I want to ask a question about that because
before I ask you the question, I just want to say that this is only available or current available on regions with availability zones. Okay, and that is the important fact over here. And again, this is why it's in public preview, because it's only in availability zones that you can have IPv6 in this case. So if your IPv6 circuit it's attached to a region that doesn't have availability zone, you cannot enable this even if it's in preview. Okay,
that's right. So
back to your question now.
Exactly, right? So this one's a little bit tricky.
Yes.
Because this is normal for us folks. I'm constantly thinking out loud. So Marcos just takes it in stride. And I appreciate your patience, Marcos.
Okay.
Thank you. So with this, we always talk about be careful not to enable or utilize preview features in production. So I want to ask, let's talk about this a little bit openly and say who is going to have an ExpressRoute into their dev test and have ExpressRoute gateway there, where they would also have, meet the requirement of having availability zones of in that. So they'd be like US West, Canada Central is getting availability zones. I think it was announced last week or the week before we talked about that. So I have some focus on Canada and the northern US, just because that's where we live and that's where the clients that I work with tend to exist. So I'm thinking to myself here, can we enable this on a production environment? Because typically ExpressRoute is used for that. And I did just shoot my big mouth off about how ExpressRoute is a foundational piece of our designs in larger scale deployments of cloud, right? So what does that mean? Like, how do we navigate those waters? Because it can be a bit tricky in this case, right?
It does. And again, we always say that we should not having preview in production, but we always say it as well that we have to look at it with a grain of salt. Okay. And
exactly.
In this case, because you cannot have, it's one of the service that you cannot have like as a dev test, right? Because this is a connection that you have between your office or between your data center to Azure. It's exactly. A connection. There is nothing that you can do. There is nothing that you are enabled. It's not a service that you are doing. It's basically a VPN. Let's call it this way. It's way better than a VPN in a lot of cases, and it's your way to do it. Although this needs to take a little bit of grain of salt, because first of all, you need to use IPv6. Okay, if you are not using IPv6, probably that's not applicable to you. Okay,
exactly.
Then it's like the private peering is a way that you have multiple peers inside of Azure. You have or in this case inside of ExpressRoute. You have the private peering, we have the public peering, and we have what's called the Microsoft peering. The Microsoft peering is for service like Office 365, or should we say Microsoft 365, right? So basically, talking about ExpressRoute is the way that you are, instead of going on the public interface, in this case on the public internet and connecting to those services, you are using that MPLS connection, that way low latency, in this case, enter into the Azure backbone that we talk about here a lot. And now you're leveraging that, the security and all of that, to just doing that.
Because that's a configurable piece.
It is a configurable piece. Like I said, it's one of those three peerings. Yeah, it's one of the three peerings. The public peering is for if you want to use the public service of Azure. So storage, for example, if you don't have private links, but storage, web apps, other things like Azure Site Recovery and all of that, you can use the peering. So you are, every time that you are using a service that is public facing of Azure, you are still going through the ExpressRoute. And the private peering, as the name says, is for your virtual machines and for everything that you have inside of your VNets. So enable these on your the IPv6 on your ExpressRoute, even on preview, is you need to have virtual machines. You need to enable IPv6 on your virtual machines to be able to use this. You need to enable a lot of those services to be able to use that. And beside of that, it's not like you enable the IPv6 on the ExpressRoute that you're going to break the IPv4. No, the tables is going to be pushed on the BGP as well, and then you have tables of IPv4, tables of IPv6, and now you are just broadcasting those tables through your network. But you have to use IPv6. If you are not using IPv6, then enable this is going to be exactly the same because you don't have nothing to broadcast.
You won't be utilizing any of the actual services
Absolutely.
or items, right? So I want to just focus in your response here just for a second on the tables. So I think that that's important because that's going to allow people to kind of visualize how this will work. So if we think of the two pipes coming down, one is we have IPv4 and one is we have IPv6. Those route tables in BGP are very much separate. So if we enable IPv6 over here, IPv4 is still going to be just fine. Even if we have a problem with that preview for whatever reason, because we're testing it, we maybe inject a bad route, or we're not being quite as careful because we don't follow change procedures while we're testing things. So IPv4, your prod section, is still going to be fine. It's over here and it's isolated. And that's the way I kind of visualize things a bit, right? So I wanted to kind of pass that one on because I think I don't want people to be so apprehensive in testing this one. If you are using IPv6 on-prem and you're facing challenges, you're using IPv6 already for that reason or others, then don't be afraid to look into this and engage your Microsoft rep. Talk to Microsoft support if you're thinking you have specific questions. That's what they're there for. They're there to help us with that stuff, right?
Absolutely. I could not agree more. Absolutely. Now, let's move to the next one. And this is our good friend AzCopy. The version 10.9.0 is in public preview. So this version allows you to import from GCP to Azure Block Blobs. So Google
cool
Cloud Platform, now you can use the AzCopy to just migrate the content from the Google Cloud Platform, the GCP, into Azure. So awesome.
And there's a typo in their release too, by the way. I just want to call that one out publicly because I think it was my turn.
So again, if you Microsoft seeing this, give us some credit, give us some love. Just put the thumbs up or a comment, say thank you guys.
Absolutely.
And apparently the left guy it's more popular than the right guy. It's what we found last week.
It's true. Yeah. So it's funny because if there was going to be a typo in a Microsoft article, you'd think it would have been Google, right? Like they would have had an extra E or something like that. I don't know. But in this case, it was just a regular typing things up in a hurry because there's so many things to do in Azure. Azure never sleeps, so we have to keep going. But this is really cool because, again, here we are with like this really small little update that looks like it's just hiding in the corner. Oh, yeah, we have a nice little tiny update for AzCopy again, minor incremental version update. And boom, Google Cloud data migration into Block Blob. I mean, that's a pretty big deal. I can't wait for GA on this one because it's a real thing, right? So people migrate between cloud platforms. It's oddly regular. It happens a lot. So it's like people exploring Google Cloud for specific reasons, or AWS for specific reasons. They also come to Azure for specific reasons, right? Yes. So whatever's right for your business, for your organization, that's where you should be. Or if you need a multi-cloud solution, then Google Cloud's actually pretty cool. A lot of like obviously containerization is the whole entire platform with GCP.
Absolutely.
But that said, we're not here to plug GCP. We're here to talk about how cool Azure stuff is. Now we can get that data directly using command line. And that's a good thing too, because when we think about GCP storage accounts and block blobs, we're really talking about huge amounts of data, right?
Absolutely. And that's really important to understand that part. It's huge amount of data. Now it's another way that facilitates that kind of migration and way better usage in this case of this. And I see good things coming. And it's not only that. Last episode, we mentioned Azure Copy as well on the Azure storage. I think it was Azure Explorer that we mentioned this, and we mentioned the version, and now they come this week like they are almost listen to our show, say, oh, the guys like it, that let's put this new update. I think was more on purpose to just for us to just keep talking about Azure Copy, AzCopy, but that's okay. We still love AzCopy, right?
Absolutely, yeah. I have to say it was one of my first tools I used to migrate big chunks of data into Azure storage accounts.
Absolutely.
And I'm going to say that was maybe 1 or 2 versions ago now, but it's actually a really versatile tool.
It is
rock solid. Like, I mean, when you're moving terabytes and terabytes and terabytes of data, it can run for weeks when you've throttled it way down low to a trickle. Weeks. And no issues, no hiccups, no problems. I love it. Sorry, it's one of those ones I get excited about. That's really weird, but it's actually a rock solid migration tool that's a little bit overlooked by some architects.
Yeah.
It's simple, it's easy, it's back to command line basics, and it just works.
Absolutely. Moving to the next one. The general availability of new VM series supported by Azure Batch. So I want to start with this. It says that they are adding to Azure Batch the DC SV2 and the HB V3 and the Ncast 4 V3. So all of those VMs are already available for using on Azure, but not on Azure Batch. Azure Batch is for, like the name say, to run a lot of those batch process. So now they are incorporating on that bigger VMs, more performance VMs to run those batches, right? And this is about this update. It's not talking about, oh, but wait a minute. Those VMs that you mentioned, they already exist on Azure Portal. Yes, they exist, but not to be used inside of Azure Batch. Okay?
That's right. Yeah, and there is a link. There's only one link at the bottom of that article or update, I suppose. But there's actually a large list, very detailed, that has the supported VM series. If we were to cover half of them, it would be a while. So there's lots of ones there, and you can dig deep into it if you wish to go and read the details on that one.
Absolutely. But yeah, they are just adding more sizes, more power, in this case to Azure Batch of running those VM sizes. Okay. Now going to the last but not the least update for this week, we have the public preview of service tags for user-defined routing. This is a very cool update about the service tags, especially for user-defined routing. And what do you think about this update, Andrew?
So it's so this is an interesting one, right? So this one's going to bridge a lot of gaps as it comes out into general availability.
Yeah.
So we've talked already this episode about BGP. We've talked about how BGP is separated into route tables. And when we think about how routes propagate, if we push routes into a network that is BGP enabled, and most backbone networks are BGP enabled. It's a very fast means of establishing routes and communications. So without going into the whole TCP/IP stack here, let's just say that this will help to put in customizations, right? Very much like route filtering. and it allows us to add tags into that layer of network communications. So I'm trying to keep this as high level as I can, but it's really tough not to deep dive on this one.
Yes, I think we should.
It's a bit of a deep subject.
It is,
right? Yeah.
And I think we should step back a little bit and talk about this. What is a service tag? What do you think about it?
Yeah.
Should we go?
So service tag.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go right from the horse's mouth on this one. So I'm glad I actually had the article up. A service tag represents a group of IP address prefixes from a given Azure service. Microsoft manages those address prefixes encompassed by the service tag and automatically updates that service tag as addresses change. That is critical to what we're talking about. So that minimizes the complexity of frequent updates to network security rules. So you can use service tags to define network access controls using NSGs, network security groups, or Azure Firewall. Here we go.
Yes.
So, right? So now we're talking about really the communication, the filtering, how we're routing traffic, and now controlling it using automation. Right.
And it's not only that. And this is one update for our good friends that they are more related to security, saying that they are only asking, can you give me the IPs so I can open the ports? In this case, you don't need to. If you use the service tags, in this case, for that routing, everything is going to be automatically updated to you. So you no longer need to manual update the routes, especially if you're having UDRs, especially if you're having everything, because when they need to be updated, if you use the service tag, automatically is going to be updated for you. And that is the best thing of this update. That's why I went a little bit, put you on the spot, and you, I know you very well, put you on the spot in this case, because I think it's important, especially for you that are listening and not seeing, in this case, the podcast on YouTube channel, but you are listening through one of our podcasts channels. That is important to go back to define what is this service tag, because now probably becomes a little bit more clear what we are talking about. Because it's important. We didn't save this for last. This is for chronological order. But it was the last update that we had this week, in this case, that we won't talk about. And I think it's, like you mentioned, it's a very important one. It's still in public preview. Again, take it as a grain of salt, okay? Because they are updating this, and the way that it might work, it might not work. So don't apply this in production, okay? But
heck no, please do not.
But this case don't. But so far, for example, and following the update, they already have 4,500 prefix that collectively represents the Azure address space. So it saves tons of work. And even when Microsoft update those, you don't need to do anything. That's the beauty of this. This is really cool.
This is one that I always think of. There's a really good example that I always share, and that is using these service tags. One of the tags is Azure. I think it was like Azure Cloud or something like that. So it's like I'm going to get the tag name wrong because I was busy scrolling through everything, but it's like Azure infrastructure, for example, right? So that includes like their data center IPs and things like that. Those really need to update automatically because they cycle through them.
Yes.
Because of so many, A, public attacks and openness, but B, because they're always expanding and extending services, right? So there's new load balancer endpoints and all those things, right? All the things. So the example that I always think of is when you enable country locks on Teams calls, and your firewall rules are locked down to, let's say, just Canada and the US. Well, what happens if your call ends up being routed to another data center, let's say Brazil? So I remember Brazil from like last week, we had an update for there. So in that case, your rules aren't going to update automatically because you're going old school and you're making your poor network security team update everything by hand. In this case, by using the tagging, those rules are automatically associated, and you can just allow that information to flow freely. When Azure updates everything, it just updates automatically for you. So it's really important because it takes a lot of the pressure off of those manual updates, which have human error and delay, because it takes time to do things as a human.
And
right?
it's not only that. It's like you mentioned, that is a very good example. The other example that I use a lot of those types is, for example, Azure Active Directory, advanced threat protection. So all of those punching the walls that you need to do it on your NSGs, for example, right? So if you have, and the way that I use this a lot is, and this is the beauty of this, is on ARM templates, right? So if you use these on ARM templates, you set these on stone. Those usually service tags, they will not change. What they will change in this case is the updates that they need to do it, right? So, for example, if you are having an ARM template to deploy it and you need to have advanced threat protection, probably the IP or the URL is going to be changed, especially now that, for example, the advanced threat protection is changing, they are rebranding from Azure ATP to Defender, in this case, or Azure Defender. Okay, so
that's correct. Yeah.
A lot of those IPs could be the same. A lot of those names, in this case, DNS names, could be different. But if you're using these service tags, okay, and if you put on your ARM template, you have a peace of mind that no matter what, in this case, your every time you're deploying these, even if it's 1 year ago or 3 or 4 years from now, they will be applicable, because it will be valid, because you are not putting anymore those domain names, those DNSs, and even those IPs, because like you mentioned, it could change. All of these services are available, right? And they could be from region to region, depending on the service you're talking about. And you don't want to block that to just lose that connectivity and lose the functionality, right? And that's the part that is value to just talking about these updates, right?
Yeah, there's a couple of links, and if you kind of flow through and click down a few layers, you can really get down into like some of the Azure routing under concepts and stuff like that, and get a really good walkthrough on what this actually means hands-on in the Microsoft KBs.
Absolutely.
Really great information in there.
And with that, we come to our end of this episode this week. So thank you so much, Andrew, one more time to just being over here. I know that we already mentioned every single episode. This is our highlight. I want to reinforce that, to just thank you, Andrew. And thank you in this case for listening, because you are the reason that we are doing this.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you so much for all of the wonderful feedback and likes and everything. It really does keep us going.
Absolutely. It motivates us a lot.
Do the lead in. Okay, get your finger on the button. I'm going to do a lead in here. So if you really do like it, let us know. Just click on the subscribe button for us and let us know right down the corner.
Exactly. And give it thumbs up, thumbs down. We want your feedback. We want your love or hate. In this case, we prefer love. We are a lovely people over here.
I don't want any of the hate. It's such a tough world.
It is, but
you can give us positive or constructive feedback, whatever you need to do.
Exactly.
That's all good. Let us know.
We
We love to hear it. We love to hear all the messages.
So once again, thank you so much for watching and for listening. And I hope I can see you next week. So, bye.